Hello, I'm Sister Hilda from the Benedictine Abbey at Jamboree in Australia. Welcome to Wisdom from the Abbey. Today, I would like to explore with you the varying kinds of spirituality that are around. In other words, I'm wanting to explore with you yet another place where you just might catch sight of God in a particular way. Let me start this way. I don't know how familiar you are with Australia. Let me tell you. Australia is in fact the driest continent on Earth. It's drier than Africa, surprisingly. Water is our big problem here. Therefore, rivers are very important to us. And every river in Australia, and maybe every river everywhere, is different depending on the terrain, etc., etc. There are our coastal rivers, and one of those coastal rivers is the Clarence River. And the Clarence River has more islands in it than any river in the world. Now, admittedly, those islands are a little bit small, but it's one of our claims to fame. I've got to tell you about yet another river. It's called the Todd River. It's more inland to Australia. Most of the time, the Todd River is nothing but a dry riverbed, because rain only comes once in a blue moon. The locals every year hold their boat races, and the one who gets the prize is the one who's got the weirdest costume of a boat. They run down the dry riverbed, and if you've got a weird boat costume, then you're in business. If you actually win the race, then you're even more in business. A few years ago, the locals were really upset. And this is why they were upset. It had rained. There was water in the river, and they couldn't have their boat races. It was a laugh out here. The point I want to make to you, though, is that, as I said, every river is different. If I want to go from here to Melbourne, I've got loads of choices. I can go the coast road, I can go the inland road, I can go the road in between, I can make up my own road. I go the road that best suits me, that best suits my capabilities. It's a bit like that with varying spiritualities. There are loads of different spiritualities around. There's Carmelite spirituality, Franciscan spirituality, Ignatian spirituality. There's creation spirituality. There's a whole bunch of them, all headed for the same purpose. They're all ways to God, like going from here to Melbourne. And they're different, like the rivers. And yet they are all rivers. They are all means of getting to God. The ticket is to find the spirituality that best suits you, that best fits you, that has the most, can I say, accessible route to God for you. Now, I want to have a look today at one of those spiritualities, and surprise, surprise, I want to look at the Benedictine spirituality. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but let me tell you about it anyway. The name even suggests where it came from. It came from St. Benedict. Now, Benedict was born in the 400s and he died in the 500s. Benedict came from your typical patriarchal family in Italy. It seems that it was a happy sort of household. At some stage, he went off to tertiary education in Rome. Now, when he got to Rome to begin this, he, like many another tertiary student, just fell apart. And the reason he fell apart was he couldn't cope. He couldn't cope with what he saw. It was a time very much like our own. The traditional values had gone out the window. He saw depravity as he didn't even know it existed. There was war. The governments were putting more money into armaments than they were putting into care of the people. Is there much difference now? It seemed that everywhere Benedict looked, there was nothing but cruelty. And he did that which, who could blame him for doing? He ran away. He took 2 years. Initially, he had his nurse, in inverted commas, that was the woman that they sent with him to look after him. She looked after him for a little while. He spent the time in prayer and in reading, trying to kind of come to grips with himself, I suppose, and kind of get over the shock of what had happened to him. In the end, loads of people found out where he was, and they got to like this young man, and also they saw the holiness in him. It didn't help at all. So the nurse went, and he went off and found a cave and lived in the cave for the next 2 years. Benedict, in that time, with nothing but the Bible and the occasional bits of bread that a monk who knew where he was brought to him, in that time, Benedict really faced himself. Something, may I say, that at some stage every one of us has got to do. Now, in facing himself, the darkness inside himself, the goodness and the not so good, he learned that the root cause of the world's problems, they weren't out there, they were in here. And he saw that if he was going to change the world, that if he was ever going to make a difference, then it had to start in here first. What developed in those years was a loving relationship with God. He met God as God really is, and he met himself as he really was. Easter came in his last year there, and a monk, Romanus, was in his monastery having his Easter dinner, which was pretty good, really, when the word of the Lord came to him. And God said to him, "How can you sit there and eat when my servant Benedict is hungry?" So Romanus, he picked up his dinner and probably put a bit extra in, took it down to where he was being led, which is where Benedict was, lowered himself down, and Benedict said to him most beautifully, he said, "Ah, I know it is Easter because I had the joy of seeing you." I think that's a lovely thing. Fancy being able to say to somebody, what a beautiful thing for any one of you to be able to say to another person, "I know it's Easter because I have the joy of seeing you." Not long after that, some monks from a monastery came to Benedict and they begged him to be their abbot. And Benedict said, no, I'm not going to do that. They pleaded, no, I'm not going to do it. They came back, no. They came back another time and he said, "Look, you don't know what you're asking. You don't want me to be your abbot. Trust me, you don't want it." But they said, we do. So he gave in, went to their monastery. Well, the truth of the matter was, they came to regret it because Benedict was too hard. He learned a mighty lesson in this. They tried to poison him, to get him out of the way. Whenever you see a picture or a statue of Benedict, you'll see generally a raven with a piece of bread in its mouth. That's because the story goes a raven flew in and took the poison away, put the poisoned bread away, and you generally see a broken cup because they poisoned the wine too. Benedict had enough sense after that to realise no sense me staying here, went off, founded his own monastery, and eventually wrote the Rule of St. Benedict. And it's from out of that rule that we glean his spirituality, which has become the spirituality of millions of people, and not just monks and nuns. Benedictine spirituality and the rule fits into everybody's life. They've written books about how it fits into businesses. It's very user-friendly. Here are some of just a few of the salient points. The first thing that Benedict says in his rule is this. He says, listen with the ear of your heart. How good is that? Listen. Listen to what? Listen to God. Listen to your life. Listen to the people that are around you. Listen to creation. Listen with an open ear. And if you have to refine your heart in order to listen, then do that. Would that you and I spent as much time on that very thing of listening. I'll let you in on something though. The more you get tied up with God, the more you'll listen, because he'll be speaking to you, as I hope he's speaking to you through this series. His next salient point actually comes out of that listening, and it's obedience. Because you see, the word obedience really comes from the Latin, which means to listen. Obedience for Benedict was not some silly thing of doing what you're told. I'm going to do what I'm told. It went far deeper than that. For Benedict, it was about listening to the people who were legitimately placed in your life. So if you're married and you've got a family, then obedience happens when you listen to your husband, to your wife, to your children. If you're one of the siblings in your family, obedience comes when you listen to your parents and when you listen to your brothers and sisters. I'm reminded of Jesus, who did nothing else but listen to his Father. Furthermore, I'll say more. And if you're a religious listening, obedience is not just doing what your superior tells you. It's listening to God in what your superior tells you. It's also obedience to your own call, to be who you've been called to be by our dear and loving God. If you're a priest, obedience comes into being the priest you were ordained to be. It's not just about being obedient to your bishop or the superior of your particular order or congregation. It's about listening to them. It's about listening to your own life as a priest, and for all our sakes, and this applies to married people and to religious people and to people who are not married. For all our sakes, we all need to be obedient. We all need to listen. If we don't, what tends to happen is that the world breaks off into that dreadful malady that we have these days, individualism. I'll go and do what I want. Oh, I don't feel like doing that today. I'm not going to do it. You won't find God that way, and Benedict knew it. So he laid a great emphasis on obedience. He also laid a great emphasis on the position of Christ. He said, in the words of St. Paul, prefer nothing whatever to Christ. And St. Cyprian added, who has preferred nothing whatever to us. I love that. Prefer nothing whatever to Christ, who has preferred nothing whatever to us. Christ for Benedict is to be found absolutely everywhere, as we'll see. Christ is to be found in the guest. Christ is to be found in the abbot. Christ is to be found in one another. Christ is to be found in the sick, in the children, in the people who come to the monastery. And that's another reason why this is also user-friendly. Christ is to be found in your own life, as they say, disguised as your own life. Christ is to be found in the person who sits beside you in the bus on your way to work or on your way to school. Christ is to be found in the person who serves you behind the shop counter when you go to get your lunch. Christ is to be found in the homeless person that you walk by on your way to the railway. Christ is to be found in the drug-affected youth who can't stand up. Christ is to be found in your elderly mother. Isn't it wonderful? Christ is so visible. And Benedict says, go find Christ. He's everywhere. Another particular feature for Benedict was the virtue of humility. Now, what Benedict says is, you put the interests of everybody else before your own. How distasteful is that? Like if there are 2 biscuits left on a plate and there are 3 people, including you, walk away and do something else. Leave the biscuits for them. It's as mundane and as simple as that. Also, Benedict says, look, put yourself last. Always put yourself in a position where you're going to learn from somebody else, where you're going to be moved by somebody else. Always regard, Benedict says, everybody else is better than yourself. Now, he didn't mean put yourself down. That's ridiculous. There's no need to do that. We're all sons and daughters of God. Nobody should be down there. However, by thinking of yourself as less, if I can put it that way, less than others, you open yourself, as I said, to learn from others. Cardinal Basil Hume, I spoke of before, who was a Benedictine monk, and an abbot too, for that matter, before he became a cardinal. He taught at the school at his monastery at Ampleforth. He always said, when he went into a classroom, he went in with the attitude, the boys have got more to teach me than I have to teach them. He came out of the classroom always filled with something new. Now that's the mark of a humble person. A humble person owns, I don't know it all. I've got stuff to learn. Let me keep going. A particular mark of Benedictine spirituality is hospitality. Benedict was big on it. He said that a monk had to be set aside to particularly, or even more than one, to look after guests. Now let me give you the background to this. It was a very courageous thing to do in the time of Benedict. In fact, you would call it silly. It was the time when Rome was being sacked, so there were armies going up and down Italy, going right past the monastery. To open your door to a guest, you could have been opening your door and the gates of the monastery, you could have been opening them to who knows who, to somebody, to a whole army who'd come in and ransacked the place. You could all be dead in your beds. But Benedict said, you open the gates nonetheless, because Christ will be in that guest, whoever they are. Also, to open your doors at that time, look, it could have been a trap as well. One poor, dishevelled person might appear. You let that poor, dishevelled person in, and immediately they've done something to bring everybody else in. Benedict's understanding of hospitality came from yet another age, and an age when, if somebody came to your home or even passed by your place, the virtue of hospitality said you will go out and you will invite them in. Even if they don't come and knock on your door and ask to stay, you go get them and bring them in. And when you bring them in, you couldn't ask them their name. You couldn't ask them anything about themselves. Now, hello, what risk value is that? That's the first thing we'd do. Tell me about yourself. So you knew who you were letting into your house. No, that was not the ancient understanding. You let them in. If they felt that they wanted to tell you who they were, and if they wanted to tell you something about themselves, well, good-o, but you couldn't ask. Now here comes the pinnacle, I believe, of their hospitality. The eldest son would be sent with you. You'd be given a map of where you were going. He would then walk with you to your next destination. That son needn't necessarily come home. He might get killed on the way. But such was the virtue of hospitality that you even offered your eldest son. Benedict would have anybody who subscribes to his spirituality really take that on board. Because then you see, you have a chance also of delving into the hospitality within yourself. What's your own heart like? Is your heart a hospitable heart? Does your heart let Christ in? How willing are you to not only let people into your heart, but how willing are you to let new ideas into your heart, to let further understandings into your heart? Now that's hospitality big time. You take the risk, maybe you'll get lost doing that, but then maybe you won't too. And maybe what you'll discover is that, and to use a scriptural term, that the pegs of the tent of your heart will be widened and make room for even more. For Benedict then, hospitality also carried that understanding that nobody was to be excluded. Everybody was welcome, no matter who they were, and no matter how they were. Benedict laid great emphasis, another salient point for him, was his emphasis on the Psalms and his emphasis on prayer. Benedictine spirituality differs from others in that Benedict didn't ever tell anybody how to pray. He just said pray. And that's fantastic, because he understood, as I have said before, he understood that everybody prays in a different way. So, okay, you be you go pray your way, but pray. The common prayer that Benedict encouraged, and indeed that the monks today still pray in the divine office, was the praying of the Psalms. Benedict even listed it out. Why? This is why. In the Psalms, you will find the story of mankind. You'll find the story of a human life. You'll find the story of the human heart. And you, my intimate friend, you're the one who's betrayed me. The poor cry out to you. "O Lord, I am poor and needy," etc., etc., etc. You go through the Psalms and you'll see for yourself. It's your own story in there. And what Benedict has us do in his brand of spirituality is that we tell the story of mankind over and over and over and over again. Somebody smart once said, and I was smart enough to remember they said it, they said that violence happens where a story can't be told or it isn't being listened to. In the Psalms, in hospitality, in the whole living out of Benedictine spirituality, the idea is, I will tell the story again and again and again. And in telling the story, I will also listen to the story of God.
Greetings from Brisbane, Australia, which is very far from where most of you are. In Jesus Christ, what we hear, what we discover, is the good news. Here we find in Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, good news for everybody. And that's why Shalom Media really does have a contribution to make. Shalom Media is seeking to communicate to families and to show to the world the truth and the beauty of what the family is within the plan of God. May the blessing of God really come to you through all that is offered in Shalom World by Shalom Media. The word Shalom itself comes from Hebrew, as you know, and it means peace. May the blessing of God's peace, the Shalom of God, for which we were created, may it come to you from the God who is peace, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Shalom World, God's own channel.